She had buried him 8 months ago, lit a candle, cried until she couldn't, and taught herself to keep moving. So when Blair looked up from the market stall and saw Kaiwan's face in the crowd, alive watching her, she didn't scream. She just pressed her hand to her stomach and prayed he hadn't noticed yet. The market in Hongdae smelled like sesame oil and rain. Blair moved through it slowly the way she'd learned to move through everything lately, deliberately, conserving energy, one hand resting just below her waist out of habit. 7 months of habit. She was wearing his hoodie. She hadn't planned that. It had just been the warmest thing near the door when she left the apartment that morning, and she was tired enough that she'd grabbed it without thinking. It was too big on her now, even with the belly. Maybe especially because of the belly. She stopped at a vegetable stall and asked for 2 portions of spinach in Korean that was still slightly imperfect but no longer embarrassing. The vendor answered in fast Seoul dialect and she caught most of it. Progress. Blair Park, she still used the name, couldn't quite let go of it, had come to Seoul 2 years ago for a brand consulting contract that was supposed to last 6 months. Then she met Kaiwan at a client dinner, and 6 months became forever, and forever became a funeral notice delivered by a man in a black suit who would not answer a single one of her questions. Cause of death. Undisclosed. Private service already held. Your presence is not required. She had stood in her apartment doorway reading that card for a very long time. That was 8 months ago. The baby was 7. She did the math every single day, and every single day it landed in the same place. On the night before the funeral notice arrived. The last night he came to her. He had been strange that evening, quiet in a way that was different from his usual quiet. He had looked at her like he was memorizing something. She had not understood it then. She understood it now. The spinach vendor handed her a bag. She paid. She turned to leave. And that's when she saw him. Standing 20 feet away between a dried fish stall and a woman selling chrysanthemums, dressed in dark clothes with no bodyguards visible but the posture that never left him. Still contained, taking up exactly as much space as he decided to, was Kai Wan. Looking directly at her. Blair's hand moved to her stomach before her brain gave the instruction. His eyes dropped. Just for a second. Then came back to her face. Neither of them moved. He crossed the distance between them in 8 steps. She counted. Blair. His voice was exactly the same. Low, precise, like every word cost something. You're dead. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. I got notice. A man in a suit. He said, I know what he said. Kai Wan's jaw was tight. I wrote it. The market kept moving around them. Someone bumped her shoulder. He reached out, instinctively, and steadied her, his hand on her arm, and she felt it, the realness of him, warm skin through her sleeve, and something cracked open in her chest. She stepped back. You wrote it, she repeated. Blair, you faked your death. She said it quietly, dangerously quietly. You let me grieve you. You let me... She stopped. Her hand went to her stomach again, not hiding it this time, just holding on. His eyes dropped again. This time they stayed. The silence between them was the loudest thing in Seoul. How long? He said. Not a question, a calculation. She watched him do the math the same way she had done it every morning for 7 months. Watched the answer arrive on his face. 8 months since your little notice, she said. 7 months since I found out. Kaiwan looked like he'd been hit somewhere vital. He stood completely still, the way he always went still when something was rewriting everything he thought he knew. And Blair watched a man who controlled half of Seoul's underground have absolutely nothing to say. Good, she thought. Now you know what it feels like. You didn't know, he said. Of course I didn't know. You were dead, Kaiwan. Her voice finally broke on his name. Just slightly, just enough. You were dead and I was alone and I had to figure it out by myself. She picked up her bag from the ground where it had fallen. Don't follow me. She walked away. He let her go, but she heard his footsteps fall in behind her at a distance. Far enough to claim he wasn't following, close enough that she knew he was. She took 3 buses home. Deliberate, complicated. The kind of route that made no logical sense unless you were trying to lose someone. He stayed with her the whole way. She knew because she checked. Every transfer, every stop, a black car, patient as a shadow, idling half a block back. She didn't acknowledge it. She sat straight, bag on her lap, and stared out the window and told herself she was not going. To cry on a public bus about a dead man who wasn't dead. She made it home without crying. That felt like a victory. Her apartment was small. 3rd floor, no elevator, which had been fine 7 months ago and was a project now. She climbed the stairs slowly, one hand on the railing, and did not look back when she heard the car door below. She made tea. She sat at her kitchen table. She pressed both hands flat on the surface and breathed. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She let it ring. It rang again. She picked up on the 4th call. I'm outside, Kaiwan said. I know. Silence. Blair, I need to explain. You don't get to need anything right now. She kept her voice even. I spent 8 months making peace with losing you. I arranged that peace very carefully, and you just walked into the middle of it. I know. So whatever you need to explain, it can wait until I decide I want to hear it. She set her mug down carefully, which might be never. Another silence. Okay, he said. Go away, Kaiwan. I'll go, but Blair... A pause. Are you safe? Are you both safe? She closed her eyes. We're fine, she said. We were fine before you showed up. She hung up. She sat in the quiet of her small kitchen, hands around her mug, and listened to the sound of a car that did not drive away for a very long time. She went into labor 3 weeks early. Not dramatically, not with a cinematic rush. She woke up at 2 a.m. with the particular low ache the books described and lay there for 40 minutes, being sensible about it before admitting it was real. She called her friend Yuna first. Voicemail. She called the clinic. They told her to come in. She sat on the edge of her bed and looked at her phone and thought about the black car that had been parked outside her building every night for the past 3 weeks. Not always, but often enough that she'd stopped being surprised by it. She was 32 weeks along. It was the middle of the night. The subway wasn't running. She called him. He picked up on the first ring like he'd been awake, like he'd been waiting. I need a ride to the hospital, she said. Don't make it weird. He didn't make it weird. He was at her door in 4 minutes, which meant he'd been very close, and she decided not to think about that. He looked at her in the doorway, coat half buttoned, bag in her hand, face set into the expression she used when she was managing something hard. And he simply took the bag, put his hand under her elbow, and said nothing. In the car, she gripped the door handle through 2 contractions, and he drove fast and clean through the empty Seoul streets. And the silence between them was different from all the other silences. Not hostile, not loaded, just 2 people moving towards something bigger than either of them. 32 weeks, she said through a breath. I know, he said quietly. I've been counting. She turned to look at him. I know everything, he said. I've been watching over you since the market. I needed to know you were okay. His voice was low. I needed to know you both were okay. She turned back to the window. That's not an apology, she said. No, he agreed. It's not. But it's the truth. The baby was not ready to arrive yet. False labor. Early, uncomfortable, enough to keep her in the clinic for observation until morning. Kiwon sat in the hallway. She knew because the nurse mentioned it with studied casualness 3 separate times, clearly fascinated. Blair said nothing each time. At 4 a.m., when the monitoring showed everything stable and the contractions had eased, she told the nurse she would speak with him. He came in looking like a man who had spent 3 hours deciding what to say and arrived at nothing. Good, she thought again. Good. Tell me why, she said. He sat down. He looked at his hands. Ki-Wan, who had never in 2 years looked uncertain about a single thing, looked uncertain. There was a man named Chaw. There was Du Jin, he said. He ran operations in the South. We had a conflict that went on for a long time. He paused. He found out about you. He sent me proof. Photographs of you at your office, at the restaurant where we had dinner the first time. He told me what he would do. Blair said nothing. I couldn't neutralize the threat with you attached to me. Every day you were mine, you were a target. His voice was flat. Rehearsed, maybe, or just very controlled. The only way to make you safe was to make you mine. So you killed yourself, she said. On paper. And made sure Cha Dojin saw the grief. He looked at her finally. He stopped watching you 3 weeks after the notice. You were no longer relevant. I was no longer relevant, she repeated. That's not... He stopped. That came out wrong. Kai-Wan. She looked at him steadily. Did it work? Is it done? Is Cha Do-jin the reason you came back? A pause. Cha Do-jin died 4 months ago. The room was very quiet. So you've been free for 4 months, she said. And you waited until I ran into you at a market. He had no answer for that. You were afraid, she said. Not a question. You fixed the danger and then you were afraid to come back. He said nothing, which was, she had learned long ago, his version of yes. They kept her until 7 a.m. Ki-Wan stayed. At some point between 5 and 6, Blair stopped pretending she didn't know he was there and told the nurse to send him in. He brought terrible vending machine coffee and a packet of crackers that he set on the tray table without ceremony. She ate 3 crackers and drank the coffee and didn't thank him, and he didn't expect her to. She, Blair said eventually. He looked up. It's a girl. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the monitors. In case you were wondering. The silence that followed was the softest one yet. I was wondering, he said quietly. She kicks at night mostly. She doesn't like loud noises. A pause. She kicked the first time I played your playlist. I don't know if that means she recognizes it or hates it. Kai-Wan made a sound that was almost, not quite, but almost, a laugh. The first real one she'd heard from him in 8 months. She had missed the sound of it with a ferocity that embarrassed her. What's her name? He asked. I haven't decided. She hesitated. I had a list. I kept taking names off. Why? She looked at him finally. Really looked. He had lines around his eyes she didn't remember. 8 months of whatever he'd been doing alone had worn something into him. Because every name I loved, she said carefully, reminded me of something we talked about. Kai-Wan looked at her for a long time. I'm sorry, he said. Not managed, not strategic, just direct and insufficient and real. I made the decision that made sense to me and I was wrong. Not about protecting you, about how I did it. About leaving you to carry it alone. Blair looked away. I know, she said. I'm sorry I missed 7s. Months. 6.5, she corrected quietly. 6.5, he agreed. The morning light came through the clinic window. Outside, Seoul was waking up. Inside, 2 people who had broken something important sat quietly with the broken pieces and didn't, for the first time, try to pretend they weren't there. She let him drive her home. She let him come upstairs just to carry the bag, she told herself. Just because the stairs were still a project. He put the bag down. He looked at her small apartment. The single set of dishes, the baby clothes folded in neat stacks on the shelf she'd built herself, the scanned photos on the refrigerator. And his face did something complicated and private. She watched him look at it. Her life without him. How small and careful and entirely hers it was. You should go, she said. Blair, I mean it. You should go. He turned to face her. I want to be here. I want to be part of. You don't get to want things yet. Her voice rose. Not shouting. Worse than shouting. Precise and controlled and full. You had 8 months, Kaiwan. 8 months where you were alive and I was grieving and my daughter was growing and you were, what? Managing your fear? Watching from cars? I was keeping you safe. You were keeping yourself safe. She pressed her hand flat over her sternum. You were scared of needing me and you used Cha Do-jin as the reason. And when he was gone, you were still scared, so you just kept watching. She shook her head. I know you. I know how you work. I used to think it was strength. All that stillness. All that control. She looked at him. It's not strength. It's just a very expensive way to be alone. Kaiwan stood completely still. The words landed exactly where she'd aimed them. She watched him not flinch. You're right, he said. I know I'm right. Her voice was tired now. And it doesn't fix anything. What would fix it? She shook her head. I don't know yet. That's the honest answer. I don't know. She opened the door. Please go. He went. She stood in the middle of her apartment and pressed both hands to her stomach and breathed and did not cry. She had a rule about crying. She could feel it. She just couldn't afford to stop once she started. She breathed until she felt steady. Then she sat down on the floor with her back against the couch and cried for 20 minutes exactly. She timed it. Then she got up and made dinner. He did not come back the next day, or the day after. The black car was gone from outside her building. She checked. Twice. Then told herself she was not checking and checked one more time. On the 4th day, she found a box outside her door. No note. Inside, the particular brand of milky tea she had once mentioned offhandedly loving. A heating pad, the kind the clinic had recommended, and a small card with 2 words in Ki-won's handwriting. I'm here. No address, no demand, no instruction about what it meant, just, I'm here. She put the tea away. She plugged in the heating pad. She set the card on the kitchen table and looked at it for 2 days. On the 6th day, she picked up her phone. She didn't call him. She wasn't ready for his voice. She sent a message instead. B. I don't know how to do this. I don't know if there's a version where I trust you the way I did before. The reply came in 4 minutes. K. There isn't. That version is gone. I'm asking for a different one. Smaller, slower. She stared at that for a long time. B. I need honesty, not protection. When something is happening in your world, you tell me. You don't disappear into it. K. Yes. B, and this baby, she doesn't get the managed version of you. She gets the real one. Present. Afraid sometimes. Real. K. I know. Yes. B. You understand I can't promise where this goes. K. I know. B. I need time. K. You have it. She set the phone down. She picked up the milky tea. She made a cup and stood at her kitchen window and looked out at the city and thought about a man who had faked his death out of fear and love in proportions she was still untangling. She thought about her daughter, who kicked at night and didn't like loud noises and had been growing in a body that had grieved and survived and kept moving. She thought about the word enough. Not perfect, not safe. Not the story she had planned. Enough. She picked up her phone again. B. Come for dinner. Tuesday. Just dinner. The reply took longer this time, like he was making sure he understood. K. Tuesday. Yes. He arrived Tuesday with food he had cooked himself. She knew because it was imperfect in the specific way his cooking always was. Slightly over-seasoned, enormous portions. The kind of meal made by someone who equates feeding people with loving them and doesn't know how to calibrate the difference. She set the table. He found the dishes without asking. He remembered where everything was. They ate, they talked. Not about everything, not yet. About the baby's name, which Blair had finally narrowed to 2 options. About a documentary she had watched last week. About the city outside the window that they had both been moving through alone for 8 months and were now possibly moving through together again. After dinner, he washed the dishes. She sat at the table and watched him. Ki-wan. He turned. The night before the notice, she said, you looked at me like you were memorizing something. He was quiet. Were you saying goodbye? Yes, he said simply. And now? He dried his hands. He came to the table and sat across from her, the way he used to in the mornings when they had time and nothing pressing and the whole city could wait. Now, he said, I'm trying to remember how to stay. Blair looked at him for a long moment. She kicked this morning, she said. Twice, very deliberately. Something moved across his face. Can I... He stopped, started again. Is it okay if I... She reached across the table and took his hand and pressed it flat against her stomach. His breath caught. They sat like that in the quiet kitchen while the city glowed outside the window, and somewhere beneath Blair's ribs, her daughter moved. Slow and certain, like someone getting comfortable, like someone who had decided this was home. What's her name? He asked. His voice was rough. Blair looked at him, at this man who had broken her and protected her and come back and was sitting in her kitchen with his hand over their daughter, and his eyes wet for the first time in the 2 years she had known him. Seo-yeon, she said. It means the one I was waiting for? Kaiwan looked at her. It works 2 ways, she said quietly. He understood. He did not leave that night. Not to stay, but because her back ached and the stairs were a project, and she let him sit in the chair by the window while she slept. And in the morning she woke up and he was still there, jacket folded, eyes closed, having fallen asleep somewhere around 2 a.m. like a man who had finally stopped, running. She made tea. She made enough for 2. Outside, Seoul moved into morning. Inside, something that had been broken very deliberately and very painfully was beginning. Slowly, imperfectly, with full knowledge of what it had cost, to be something else. Not what it was before. Something better, something chosen. Seo-yeon kicked. Blair smiled.